we are going to get rolling here. Notes are out in chat. If you're not on YouTube, good for you. And you can go to PATRIOT'S.com and you can find what we're looking for. I'll walk you through that real quick. So PATRIOT'S.com. Go to the Shows tab when you get here. Shows tab is up under the menu. You're going to see menu with 3 lines, or you're just going to see 3 lines. Depends if you're on a mobile device, phone, tablet, or on a PC. You're going to go down to Shows. And when you get to Shows, you'll see all of the shows. Each of them has a banner. You're watching Big Tech. So you click on Big Tech. You can get to the show notes by going to the section that says Read, Watch, Think for Yourself. It's right here. Again, if you're on a mobile device, you're going to have to scroll down a little bit. Everything's going to be centered, and it's down a ways. So just scroll down, and you can find the section Read, Watch, Think for Yourself. You click on Big Tech Notes, and you get the archives. And the archives go from show 1 up until show 87. That's what we're working on today, episode 87. And they're in groups of 10. And just to kind of, we'll pick 11 through 20 here, give you a little preview of what's in here. This is full of rich, useful information. Surveillance, wearable sensors, fabrics that sense what's going on around you, on your wrist or on your body. Google, MIT, washable wearable biosensors, software-defined radio. We're going to get into that here in upcoming episodes. Get back into DARPA and their whole Spectrum Collaboration Challenge and how that works in with 5G. Tuning circuits for hybrid electronic devices and antennas, multi-band antennas, diversity circuitry. All this stuff is in your mobile devices, and they scale and flex with frequencies, amplitude, modulation, and all of that. All of these are related to antennas or different things that are inside modern technology. EEG, brainwave collection, stuff about China, Cornell, MIT, different commercial grade brainwave monitors, wireless earbuds that record your brainwaves. Yeah, things like Apple AirPods. So this is just one group of 10 in the archives. It goes on and on and on. We're only at episode 15, and we looked at 11 through 20, right? So that's 5 episodes. More about wireless earbuds, reading your brain, capacitive sensors, which is what they use to create the electric fields in order to read your brain. Capacitive sensors are in everything, and all your mobile devices. More about brainwave monitoring. Deep brain stimulation with delivering temporally interfering electric fields. That's from MIT. And yeah, happy music listening with your Bluetooth headphones. And different ways the electromagnetic waves can modulate your brain, manipulate your neurology, that kind of stuff. And interesting stuff. Google patented a throat tattoo to be able to read your speech without you actually talking. Media Lab, MIT Media Lab, DARPA's Neuralink, open water, government serious about creating mind control weapons. Here's articles. Like I said, there's all kinds of cool stuff in the archives. So PATRIOT'S.com, shows tab, go to the Big Tech banner, and get to the archive notes. They're in groups of 10. Happy reading. Today, we are on episode 87. And I found this was sent to me by a few people, somebody at work, ironically enough. Paul Revere sent this to me, and it circled around Twitter for a while. June 1983, Department of the Army, U.S. Army Operational Group, Army Intelligence and Security Command. This is in the CIA FOIA library. Here's the document number. We're gonna read this top to bottom. There's a few pages, so we're probably gonna take 2 shows to do this, but it gets into consciousness and this idea of the brain, and I'll show you a picture here to kind of wet your beak, so to speak. So this is kind of looks like your brain, right? Breaking it down, brain structures, biomedical models. Transcendence is in here, biofeedback, talks about consciousness, gateway, and hemisphere sync. So this is some interesting Interesting stuff. We're going to take it piece by piece, one word at a time. So here we go. Says to Commander, U.S. Army Operational Group Fort Meade, Maryland. You asked me to provide an assessment of the Gateway experience in terms of its mechanics and ultimate practicality. As I set out to fulfill that tasking, it soon became clear that in order to assess the validity and practicality of the process, I needed to do enough supporting research and analysis to fully understand how and why this process works. Frankly, sir, that proved to be an extremely involved and difficult business, initially based on our conversations with a physician who took the Gateway training with me. I had recourse to the biomedical models developed by Ishtak Bentov to obtain information concerning the physical aspects of the process. Then I found it necessary to delve into various sources for information concerning quantum mechanics in order to be able to describe the nature and functioning of human consciousness. I had to be able to construct a scientifically valid and reasonably lucid model of how consciousness functions under the influence of the brain hemisphere synchronization technique employed by Gateway. Once this was done, the next step involved recourse to theoretical physics in order to explain the character of the time-space dimension and the means by which expanded human consciousness transcends it in achieving Gateway's objectives. Finally, I again found it necessary to use physics to bring the whole phenomenon of out-of-body states into the language of physical science, to remove the stigma of its occult connotations and put it in a frame of reference suited to objective assessment. I began the narrative by briefly profiling the fundamental biomedical factors affecting such related techniques as hypnosis, biofeedback, and transcendental meditation, so that their objectives and mode of functioning could be compared in the reader's mind with the Gateway experience as the model of its underlying mechanics was developed. Additionally, that introductory material is useful in supporting the conclusions of the paper. I indicate that at the times these related techniques may provide useful entry points to accelerate movement into the Gateway experience. Niels Bohr, the renowned physicist, once responded to his son's complaints about the obtuse nature of certain concepts in physics by saying, "You are not thinking, you are merely being logical." Interesting. You are not thinking, you are merely being logical. And when I read that statement, as a side note, I see the difference between human consciousness and AI. The physics of altered human consciousness deals with some conceptualization that are not easily grasped or visualized exclusively in the context of ordinary left brain linear thinking. So, to borrow Dr. Bohr's model or mode of expression, parts of this paper will require not only logic, but a touch of right brain intuitive insights to achieve a complete, comfortable grasp of the concepts involved. Nevertheless, once that is done, I am confident that their construction and application will stand up to the test of rational critique. Paradoxically, I've gone to such great lengths to avoid trying to render judgments based on an occult or dogmatic frame of reference. In the end, I found it necessary to return, at least briefly, to the question of the impact of the Gateway experience on common belief systems. I did so because although it was essential to avoid attempting to render an assessment in the context of such systems, I felt it was necessary after having completed the analysis to point out that the resulting conclusions do not do any violence to the fundamental mainstream of either Eastern or Western belief systems. Unless that point is clearly established, the danger exists that some people will reject the whole concept of the Gateway experience in the mistaken belief that it contradicts and is therefore alien to all that they hold to be right and true. This study is certainly not designed to be the last word on the subject, but I hope that the validity of its basic structure and of the fundamental concepts upon which it is based will make it a useful guide for other USA INSCOM personnel who are required to take the gateway training or work with gateway materials. And it's Wayne McConnell, Lieutenant Colonel, Military Intelligence. This is back in 1983. The gateway experience. Brain hemisphere synchronization in perspective. Introduction. In order to describe the Monroe Institute technique for achieving altered states of consciousness, the, quote, gateway experience, end quote, involving brain hemisphere synchronization, or Hemi-Sync, the most effective way to begin is to briefly profile the basic mechanics which underlay operation of related methods such as hypnosis, transcendental meditation, and biofeedback. It is easiest to effectively describe what gateway is by beginning with a short description of those associated techniques that share some common aspects with the gateway experience, but which are nevertheless different. In this way, we can develop a frame of reference at the outset, which will provide useful concepts to explain and understand gateway by comparison as we proceed. Hypnosis. According to the theories of psychologist Ronald Stone and the biomedical engineering models of Ishtak Bentov, hypnosis is basically a technique which permits acquisition of direct access to the sensory motor cortex and pleasure centers and lower cerebral, the emotional portions, and associated pleasure centers of the right side of the human brain, following successful disengagement of the stimulus screening function of the left hemisphere of the brain. The left hemisphere of the brain is the self-cognitive, verbal, and linear reasoning component of the mind. It fulfills the function of screening incoming stimuli by categorizing, assessing, and assigning meaning prior to allowing passage to the right hemisphere of the mind. The right hemisphere, which functions as the non-critical, holistic, non-verbal, and pattern-oriented component of the brain, appears to accept what the left hemisphere passes to it without question. Consequently, if the left hemisphere can be distracted, either through boredom or through reduction to a soporific semi-sleep state, external stimuli, to include hypnotic suggestions, are allowed to pass unchallenged into the right hemisphere, where they are accepted and acted upon directly. The result may involve an emotional reaction originating in the lower cerebral region, sensory motor responses requiring involvement of the cortex, and so on. Both the sensory and the motor cortices of the right cerebral portion of the brain contain a sequence of points known as the homunculus, which corresponds to the points in the body. And it says, see Exhibit 1 on the next page, and that was the picture that we were looking at. We'll go back there in a minute. Stimulation of the corresponding area on the cortex causes intermediate response in the associated portion of the body. Consequently, induction of the suggestion that the left leg is numb, if it reaches the right hemisphere unchallenged and is referred to the appropriate area of the sensory cortex, will result in an electrical reaction being generated that will induce the feeling of numbness. Things that make you go, Similarly, the suggestion that the person is experiencing a general feeling of happiness as well and well-being will be referred to the appropriate pleasure centers located in the lower cerebral portion or in the cortex of the right hemisphere, thereby inducing the suggested feeling of euphoria. Finally, suggestions such as one that informs the hypnotic subject that he enjoys enhanced concentration or powers of memory would be responded to in the right hemisphere by accessing unused information storage capacity normally held in reserve as a result of left hemisphere selection and control processes. This aspect will become significant in the context of the gateway process, when attention is given to examining the way that hypnosis may be used to accelerate progress in the early stages of the gateway experience. So creepy, creepy. If they can turn off the left side of your brain, they can basically, that's like tearing down the firewall, the logic, reasoning center of the brain, and it's direct access to your emotions, your motor movements, memory, all of that. So if they can partition your brain like they would partition a hard drive, anything potentially is possible. Transcendental meditation. On the other hand, transcendental meditation works in a distinctly different fashion. In this technique, intense and protracted single-minded concentration, so focus on one thing, on the process of drawing energy up in the spinal cord ultimately results in what appears to be a creation of acoustical standing waves in the cerebral ventricles, which are then conducted to the gray matter in the cerebral cortex on the right side of the brain. As a result, according to Bentov, these waves will stimulate and eventually polarize the cortex in such a way that it will tend to conduct a signal along the homonucleus starting from the toes and on up. The Bentov biomedical model, as described in a book by Lee Sinella, MD, entitled Kundalini Psychosis or Transcendence, states that the standing acoustical waves that are a result of the altered rhythm of heart sounds, which are occasioned by prolonged practice of meditation, and which set up sympathetic vibrations in the walls of the fluid-filled cavities which comprise the third and lateral ventricles of the brain. So let's pause and kind of break that down a little bit. Transcendence, Kundalini psychosis, transcendental meditation, whereby you focus on channeling energy up through your spinal cord exclusively. And the change in your heartbeat as you meditate creates standing waves in ventricles in your brain, right? In ventricles in your brain. Sympathetic vibrations in the walls of the fluid-filled cavities which comprise the third and lateral ventricles of the brain in order to create an altered state with acoustic waves that are self-generated by a change in your heartbeat and an exclusive focus on stimulating energy, pushing energy up through your spinal cord into your brain. In addition, according to Bentov, the states of bliss described by those whose Kundalini symptoms have completed the full loop along the hemispheres may be explained as a self-stimulation of the pleasure centers in the brain caused by the circulation of a current along the sensory cortex. Bentov also notes that most of the described symptoms start on the left side of the body, means that it is mostly a development occurring in the right hemisphere. The right hemisphere controls the left side of the body. Left hemisphere controls the right side of the body. Although normally a period of meditation involving intense concentration and practice for 5 years or some is required to bring up the Kundalini, Bentov states that exposure to mechanical or acoustical vibrations in the range of 4 to 7 hertz or cycles per second for protracted periods may achieve the same effect. So we're talking about artificial stimulation of mechanical or acoustic vibrations in the range of 4 to 7 hertz. How would they do that? Thermoacoustics? Anybody? Photoacoustics? Or just acoustics, binaural beats? 4 to 7 hertz off from the left headphone to the right headphone. Brainwave entrainment. Anyway, Bentov cites, as an example, repeated riding in a car whose suspension and seat combination produce that range of vibrations, or being exposed for long periods of time to these frequencies, caused, for instance, by an air conditioning duct. He also notes that the cumulative effect of these vibrations may be able to trigger a spontaneous physio-kundalini sequence in susceptible people who have particularly sensitive nervous systems. Well, that's very interesting, because if you look up Heinrich Loose, you will find, I'll show you. Let's look up Loose nervous system manipulation. And we will go over these in detail. These are all patents for Loose. And he talks about this very thing, using a fan for cooling, something to heat up your tissue, thermal, acoustic, magnetic fields, electric fields, and he's patented electric field generators as well as a magnetic field generator to do these things at 2.4 hertz, to be able to stimulate and manipulate your nervous system. Method and apparatus for manipulating nervous systems. And this one is the famous one, nervous system manipulation by electromagnetic fields from monitors. And we will go over these in the future. Nonetheless, they exist. This stuff has been patented. It's been around for a long, long time. And here's a pretty little picture to show you what a monitor, and they talk about a CRT, they talk about an LCD television, they talk about changing the color in a certain frequency to impact your brain, and a change in the hue. So it's the same color, but instead of it being a dark red, it goes to a lighter red, and then it goes back to a dark red, and then a lighter red, and it oscillates. And in this case, he focuses on 2.4 hertz in the majority of his patents. But what you see here is a computer that can do it, right? A television can do it, and all kinds of crazy little things going on here. And oh, look, a remote computer over the internet. Through a computer to jack with your brain. But we're not quite there yet. We still have to read what military intelligence has to say about this artificial stimulation at these low hertz cycles that can induce these cumulative effects on the nervous system. And in this case, we're talking about spontaneous physio-kundalini sequences that occur in susceptible people who are particularly sensitive to manipulations of the nervous system. This stuff kind of infuriates me. So I'm doing my best to be on good behavior, because this is all around us. And yeah, we're pussyfooting around with stupid people at the federal level, and in reality, it's big tech, big telecom that are dragging us around by our nose at this point, with rogue elements of the military and rogue elements of the federal government. All of it basically treason and an act of war, with the assistance of China and elements in Europe. Anyway, biofeedback. The third consciousness altering methodology, which will be briefly described, is biofeedback. Biofeedback is somewhat unique in that it actually employs the self-cognitive powers of the left hemisphere to gain access to such areas of the right brain as the lower cerebral motor and sensory cortices and assorted pain or pleasure centers. Instead of suppressing the left hemispheres, as is done in hypnosis, or largely bypassing and ignoring it, as is done in transcendental meditation, biofeedback teaches the left hemisphere first to visualize the desired result, and then to recognize the feelings associated with the experience of successful right hemisphere access to the specific lower cerebral cortex, pain or pleasure, or other areas in the manner needed to produce the desired result. Biofeedback, you say? Biofeedback, you say? Oh, well, we can look at things that collect biofeedback. We can look at mobile wearable devices like a watch. You know, this one reads your brainwaves, is a straight up watch that literally transfers thought over the internet. So there's one example. And then you have the Apple Watch, right? Wearable electronic device for sensing biological parameters. And there's some cute little pretty pictures here about this Apple Watch. This was patented a while ago, and the new one that just came out is even better. It's even better and more advanced and more sophisticated. And it's made to give you a better life, make you a happier, better version of you. Biometric collection, biofeedback, understanding biometrics. So this creates a closed feedback loop whereby whatever's happening to you in your left hemisphere or your right hemisphere or whatever else can be extracted, cataloged, categorized, understood, profiled, so that you are known by others better than you know yourself. That pad talked about the electrode part. This talks about the light field camera. The light field camera. See, it's putting light down into your wrist. Shines nice little pretty green and infrared lights. Oh, look, it images all of these things. And it gets even better because they can do stuff like this. They understand where the arteries are, where the veins are, where the tendons are, where your bones are, perhaps where the nerves are. Do you think they can transmit energy in there and stimulate those three main nerves that kind of travel down your arm? And do things like, I don't know, what this thing does, like read your brainwaves? Maybe. I mean, it's only got the electrodes on it like the Apple Watch, and it has a coil on it, which the Apple Watch has because that's how it talks to your phone. That's how it talks to your Bluetooth. That's how it talks to the cell network without your Apple phone around because it's so convenient. That's just the watch. Since we're talking about biofeedback, being able to do things like alter your consciousness, we might as well talk about the earbuds again. EEG monitor, brainwave monitor with capacitive electrodes and methods of monitoring brainwaves. Capacitive electrodes. They don't have to actually make contact with your body. They just emit electric fields, and they can do this. And look, these are AirPods. And look, these are capacitive electrodes painted all along your AirPods. It says right here, earbud devices with capacitive sensors. And up here, it says EEG monitor with capacitive electrodes. It's the same thing. And they look like this. Wired or wireless, it doesn't matter. Apple loves you. They come in white, they come in black. They come in many colors. It's so trendy. It gets better. We have Beats by Dre. And Beats by Dre come in many form factors. And what you see here is little conductive pieces of material that are inside that emit electric fields so that the Beats by Dre knows how deeply the earbud is inserted into your canal. And sense what's going on around it. These are electric fields that are emitted. There's one example of a Beats by Dre, and it gets better because here's some more. These are wireless Beats by Dre, and these are sports versions, so you can play hoops or run or whatever else you want to do. And these little babies have electrodes in the form-fitting wire that are conductive and talk back to the computer or the chip inside. So you have the electrodes inside and you have the electrodes that go around the back of the ear. Biofeedback, understanding what's going on with you. Every thought, emotion emits specific changes, electromagnetic changes. We're not talking about offense at this point. We're just looking at being able to read, because offense might be a little too far out there for some people. These are the most popular ones, models like this. And all of these are electrodes that are inside. So they can just play a symphony around your ear, in your ear, on your ear. All of these are individual electrodes that can be energized at any given time in any combination. But they look so cool. I want some. I really, really want some. Electrodes. It doesn't stop with Apple. We have Bose, right? Earbud insertion sensing method with capacitive technology. Happy little Bose. Earbuds, wired, wireless, matters not, right? And look, they have conductive traces too. These conductive traces do the same thing we just looked at. So, let's go back to what we were reading here. Biofeedback. Oh yes, those beneficial things that big tech is doing for you so you can sleep better, so that you know when you're getting stressed out, so you know how many steps you've taken, so you know what your cardiovascular health is. Have you drank enough water today? Have you moved enough today? Your alarm went off. It's time for your health break. Biofeedback is somewhat unique in that it actually employs the self-cognitive powers of the left hemisphere to gain access to such areas of the right brain as the lower cerebral motor and sensory cortices and assorted pain or pleasure centers, instead of suppressing the left hemisphere, as is done in hypnosis, or largely bypassing and ignoring it, as is done in transcendental meditation. Biofeedback teaches the left hemisphere first to visualize the desired result, and then to recognize the feelings associated with the experience. Of such successful right hemisphere access to the specific lower cerebral cortex, pain or pleasure or other areas in the manner needed to produce the desired result. Special self-monitoring devices, such as the digital thermometer, are used to inform the left brain when it succeeds in keying the right brain hemisphere into accessing the appropriate area. And I have to ask all of you out there, does this process have to involve you? Or can this feedback loop be done without your involvement? Just want to kind of put that out there. You know, big tech loves you. They respect the Constitution. They respect your sovereignty. They respect your privacy. They wouldn't dare try to censor your very thoughts, would they? They wouldn't dare try to manipulate or change your perceptions of any particular issue, political, environmental, or otherwise, would they? Oh, no. No, they are the guardians of Americana. Once this is done, the left brain can then repeatedly instruct the right brain to reestablish the pathways involved. Oh. Once this is done, right, the feedback loop, the self-monitoring devices, such as one example, a digital thermometer, right? We just looked at a few others, modern, trendy little wearables that everybody likes to own, that we pay for, at a premium, I might add. Right? So these feedback tools inform the left brain when it succeeds in keying up the right hemisphere into accessing the appropriate area, right? Could be motor functions, could be emotions, could be memories, right? Once this is done, the left brain can then repeatedly instruct the right brain to reestablish pathways involved so as to produce the same external objective measures of success. So we are regrooving and retraining the brain. Pavlov comes to mind. Muscle memory, that's another commonly understood idea, right? Reward for behaviors, discipline for behaviors, same type of stuff, right? Where you're establishing behavioral patterns or reestablishing behavioral patterns or perceptions, right? But you're doing this on your own in this case, in this idea of biofeedback that you're consenting to and you have some control over in this matter that we're reading here. In this way, the pathways are strengthened and emphasized to such an extent that the left brain consciousness is enabled to access appropriate areas in the right brain using a conscious demand mode. So I ask you again, this closed loop feedback system that exists and persists, are you involved in that? Is there any accountability if this is being done at this time? Would you put it past big tech, big telecom, big pharma, and all the poop sticks that run the world at this point to consider ways to make you love your servitude and love your re-education in a nice, gentle, subtle kind of a way? I'm just saying. I mean, we're on the knife's edge at this point. Might as well just cut the bullshit, in my view. For example, if the subject wishes to increase the circulation in the left leg, this is getting interesting, in order to speed up healing, he may concentrate with his left brain on achieving that result while carefully monitoring a digital thermometer connected to the left leg. Keep in mind, one example is a digital thermometer. So we're monitoring biofeedback, concentrating on performing some function in the body, and measuring biofeedback, biometrics, to understand whether or not you're successfully creating the intended change.
Cool article, huh?
Yeah, this is a great paper, dude. It's freaking me out when I'm reading it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, we covered this. I was listening to you and you started mentioning the gateway and all that. Whoa, that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah, this thing is amazing.
Yeah, it's all around us.
Well, I wanted to ask you, I don't mean to interrupt your show, but based on the stuff that you've been diving into, and then you read this, it probably makes a lot of connections, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's everybody's in on it, man. I mean, the military would use this stuff for, you would think, for outward projection. So to project power outwards, or to monitor outside of CONUS, if you will, or outside the United States territories. But we all know that all of that ideology, this idea of protecting Americans and then using whatever means necessary, so to speak, I use that term loosely, to project power outwards to defend American interests, right? That's all bullshit. I mean, all this has now been spun off to multinational corporations and has been dispersed to different countries. Everybody's doing this to everybody in this giant order out of chaos clusterfuck at this point.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Welcome to the new world.
They won't get away with it.
Sure hope not, dude. This is like serious crimes against humanity. To weaponize this kind of research and or technological advancements, to weaponize that and then to deploy it against people, to basically get rid of everybody in one form or another, man, this is like I don't know. Wrath of God comes to mind. So it's this stuff irritates.
But when you think about it, in the right hands, it could do a lot of good.
Oh, this This stuff would allow greater survivability in space. It would allow potentially interdimensional communication. It would allow accelerated education. It would allow this idea of training people how to self-heal, self-regulate.
Yes.
Would remove this necessity on medication for every little ailment or every little stress. We would be able to teach ourselves to truly be independent. I mean, that is the other end of the spectrum. I know that the presentation of the information so far has been on the nefarious applications, because that is what they're doing. Just my opinion, asterisk, fine print, all that shit. It's what they're fucking doing. Conversely, the renaissance that would be realized with the appropriate application of this kind of stuff is unimaginable. What will be in 50 years if this stuff is applied in a real libertarian, freedom-based, sovereignty-based type renaissance, because it will take this idea of innovation, ingenuity, and a word I like to use that I made up is Amerifabricated. So Amerifabrication, and that can apply to any country. This idea of being in your garage and tinkering and making something and being great, becoming great as a result of that. This kind of stuff, this kind of technology would put nitrous oxide behind that for any country. Yet it's being used to enslave us, make us sick, study exactly how these open air experiments are being done by extracting the biometric information and cataloging it and databasing it so they can better understand how to fine tune the weapon systems that are deployed against us in a variety of ways. So this is, I listen to, all the, as much as I can stand about, they're not going to arrest anybody, and we're still waiting on this, and we're going to just softball this out and that out. And I throw the middle finger at it. It's not a waste of time. It is not the most important thing, because as we speak, just about every child in America is sitting with an electronic device in multiple Wi-Fi fields with this shit going on. They are raping children. And it's not just the ones you think of when you're like, oh, child trafficking. No, that is one segment. This is a spiritual and psychological raping of the species, is what this kind of stuff is.
What's the name on that document?
It is the Analysis and Assessment of the Gateway Process, and it's a CIA doc RDP 96-007-88R0017 002-10016-5.
Oh, I know I've got it stuck here in my.
You want me to DM it to you real quick?
No. I was just going to try to find it, because I remember reading it, and it was quite a while ago that we covered it on Hyperdrive.
There it is.
And, oh, okay. Yeah, it's we were reading it, and it was like, wow, this is some crazy crap.
Well, and it's what, 40 years old at this point?
Yeah,
approximately.
Yeah,
that it was published.
They've been doing this shit for a long time, man.
Yeah, way long time. So we were at.
I'll get out of your hair here.
Cool. Thanks for stopping in. We got a chance to digress, and I'll tell you how I really feel. So we were talking about self-inducing, right? Being able to focus on increasing blood circulation in the left leg in order to speed up healing. And therefore being able to concentrate with the left brain on achieving that result while carefully monitoring a digital thermometer connected to the left leg. Keep in mind, this is the left leg. So you're focusing using your left brain to access your right brain, because your right brain controls the left side of your body. So we're just tying all those pieces together, where you're engaging both hemispheres of the brain in order to induce self-healing by increasing circulation to your leg. When the concentrated effort begins to achieve success, the digital thermometer will register an increase in the temperature of the left leg because you have increased blood flow. At that point, the subject can mentally, left brain, associate the sensations experienced with the result achieved, right? So what does that feel like when you see the thermometer go up? What does that feel like? How does that make you feel? And can begin to emphasize by memory recall the same process to cause its strengthening by affirmation and repetition. Muscle memory, Pavlovian. I like the way my leg feels. I'm going to remember how I did that. I'm going to practice that so I can make my leg feel that way all the time. In this way, pain can be blocked. Healing can be enhanced. Malignant tumors can apparently be suppressed and ultimately destroyed. Malignant tumors, you say? The body's pleasure centers can be stimulated. Now we're talking. And a variety of specific physiological results may be achieved. In addition, biofeedback may be used to greatly accelerate achievement of deep meditative states, particularly for beginners who have no experience in meditative techniques. So using electronic feedback in order to get to a better, more effective or efficient state of meditation as a novice, right? Improve your meditative techniques, and whose progress in that methodology is enhanced through effective visualization and external objective affirmation. Display of the subject's brainwave patterns on a cathode ray tube or a television or a monitor, this was back in the 80s, right, has proven to be a laboratory validated means by which subjects may quickly learn to place themselves in profoundly relaxed states characterized by the sort of quietude and singularity of mental focus associated with advanced meditation. So they were putting brainwave patterns on monitors back in the 80s, folks. Back in the 80s. Gateway and Hemisphere sync. Now that we have briefly profiled the basic mechanics of the principal techniques for altering or expanding consciousness, which share some of the objectives and or methods employed in the gateway experience, we may proceed to focus on what that technique actually involves. Fundamentally, the gateway experience is a training system designed to bring enhanced strength, focus, and coherence to the amplitude and frequency of brainwave output between the left and right hemispheres so as to alter consciousness, moving it outside the physical sphere so as to ultimately escape even the restrictions of time and space. Now, this is a military intelligence document created by a lieutenant colonel for somebody else in the military. And they are talking about training the brain to improve, enhance, increase, manipulate on demand the amplitude and frequency of brainwave outputs between the left and right hemispheres so as to alter consciousness, so as to ultimately escape the restrictions of time and space. To escape the restrictions of time and space. Now you tie one of these people trained up in this stuff up to a quantum computer that works off of random probability, or you tie them up to something like a, Stargate or Project Looking Glass kind of thingy. Things that make you go, Remote viewing, being able to tap in and, just remote view right into someone else's R&D, their bioweapons lab. Or better yet, use signals intelligence and feed that back where you're actually probing with electromagnetics or otherwise, maybe scalar. And you render that into some type of a composite and you feed that back into someone's brain that's trained in being able to manipulate amplitude and frequencies of their brainwave output between left and right hemisphere. And we are developing psychic weapon systems, folks. Psychic weapon systems. That's what we're really talking about here. So the participant then gains access to the various levels of intuitive knowledge, which the universe offers. I will read that again. Training the brain to enhance left and right brain hemisphere coherence, to manipulate the amplitude and frequency of the brainwave outputs between the left and right hemispheres, to escape the restrictions of space and time, to gain access to the various levels of intuitive knowledge which the universe offers. So now we're talking about tapping into the general cosmic consciousness. And I bet that's different for every person because everybody's brainwaves are just a little bit different. What does your brain fingerprint do when tapped into global, or better stated, cosmic consciousness, whereby your brain fingerprint is different than mine and is different from anyone else's, and therefore understands and perceives and tunes in just ever so differently? Can they do this to people in the background? If you think about your brain as a computer, it runs a web browser, it runs multiple tabs, it runs your email, it runs spreadsheets, it runs PowerPoint, it runs virus protection software, it's downloading information, it's doing all of these things at the same time, yet what's on the screen might be this document while you listen to me ramble on, yet all of these other functions are happening. And I ask you this question: does your brain do that? And simply put, the answer is yes, because your heart's still beating, you're still breathing, your body is still regulating temperature, you're not pissing yourself, you're not pooping yourself, you might be eating, you might be drinking, you might be subtly distracted with something else going on, multitasking perhaps, maybe even making bullshit comments in chat, or good ones. And the point is this: just because you don't think it's happening doesn't mean that it's not. That's all I'm saying. What differentiates the gateway experience from forms of meditation is its use of the Hemi-Sync techniques, synchronizing left and right brain, which is defined in a monograph by Monroe Institute trainer Melissa Jager as a state of consciousness defined when the EEG patterns of both hemispheres are simultaneously equal in amplitude and frequency, although Hemi-Sync seems to be rather rare and of only short duration in ordinary human consciousness, right? Melissa Jager states that audio techniques developed by Bob Monroe can induce and sustain Hemi-Sync with the Institute's basic Focus 3 tapes. So what we're talking about is brainwave entrainment with binaural beats or hypnotic readings. And it says, I want to restate this: Hemi-Sync seems to be rather rare, meaning it's infrequent and of short duration in ordinary human consciousness. So this is something that needs to be developed or artificially induced. And we will look at things like, I'll show you things like this. We will go over lots and lots of things like this. It's in spreadsheets. And what I want to show for you, I have a whole tab on cerebral programming. Cerebral programming. That's really what we're dancing around here. Cerebral programming. There's lots of them here. I'm not sharing this spreadsheet yet. Not just yet. There's quite a bit on here. Like on this tab, for example, there's 183 patents so far and counting. There's still more tabs to go. And there's antennas and body communication, all the new stuff that's coming out in the new iPhones, all these things that emit electric and magnetic fields, and using your body as an antenna and all of that fun stuff. But we'll get there eventually. Back to Hemi-Sync, brain hemisphere synchronization, right? Audio techniques developed, binaural beats, they're in there. You can do this with light, with sound. You can do this with electromagnetic waves. Studies conducted by Elmer and Alice Green at the Menninger Foundation have shown that a subject with 20 years of training in Zen meditation could consistently establish Hemi-Sync at will, sustaining it for over 15 minutes. Dr. Stuart Temlau, a psychiatrist and a research associate of the Monroe Institute, reports that, quote, in our studies of the effect of the Monroe tape system on brain waves, we have found that the tapes encourage the focusing of brain energy. It can be measured, as with a light bulb, in watts, into a narrower and narrower frequency band. This focusing of energy is not unlike the yoga concept of one-pointedness, which we may translate in Western terms as a single-mindedness. Dr. Temlau goes on to observe that as the individual gets into the tapes beyond focus 3, there is a gradual increase in brainwave size, which is a measure of brainwave energy or power. Lamp versus laser. Melissa Jager uses a metaphor to help clarify the process involved in the use of Hemi-Sync in the gateway experience. She points out that the human mind, in its natural state, may be linked to an ordinary lamp, which expends energy in the form of both heat and light, but in a chaotic, incoherent way, which diffuses its energy over a wide area rather than limited depth. On the other hand, the human mind, under the discipline of Hemi-Sync, acts after the fashion of a laser beam, which produces a disciplined stream of light, or coherent light, or wave coherence. You can look those terms up. They're quite interesting. The stream of energy is projected with total coherence of both frequency and amplitude, such that the surface area of a laser beam contains billions of times the concentrated energy found in a similar surface area on the sun. Gateway assumes that once the frequency and amplitude of the human brain are rendered coherent, it is possible to begin accelerating both, so that the human mind is soon resonating at ever higher vibrational levels. Hello, 5G. The mind can then bring itself into synchronization with more sophisticated and rarefied energy levels in the universe. The mind, when operating at these increasingly rarefied levels, is assumed to be capable of processing the information thus received through the same fundamental matrix by which it makes sense of ordinary physical sensory input to achieve meaning in a cognitive context. That is a long, complex sentence. Let's read that one again. The mind can bring itself into synchronization with more sophisticated and rarefied energy levels in the universe. What are we talking about here? Alpha waves, beta waves, theta waves, delta waves, gamma waves, right? Different hertz, different frequencies. You start very low. Half hertz to 4 hertz is like delta waves, right? And you have the rest, and they go up. And we typically stop around 100 and 120 hertz, gamma range. What I think they're getting at here is brainwave entrainment, self-induced brainwave entrainment or otherwise, and then speeding up or slowing down the brainwaves, potentially beyond what is normally occurring with human consciousness. And even more so, maybe even in a more sophisticated fashion, complex combinatorial brainwaves, whereby it's not one frequency that's hemi-synced and amplified, but maybe a combination of frequencies, kind of like a lock and key or a codex or a cryptex or a cipher. The right combinations of frequencies that are sunk up left hemisphere to right hemisphere, oscillating and resonating in the right way to create a unique access to this universal energy field or universal intelligence field that they are talking about, the rarefied energy levels in the universe. The mind, when operating at these increasingly rarefied levels, they don't say singular, this could be plural, rarefied levels could be a recipe, is assumed to be capable of processing the information thus received through the same fundamental matrix by which it makes sense, the brain makes sense of ordinary physical sensory input. So these rarefied energy levels can be processed and understood by the brain and potentially the body if trained properly, right, to achieve meaning in a cognitive context, to understand these subtle, finer nuances, the extrasensory perceptions, the spiritual realms, if you will, the interdimensional energies, the interdimensional environment. What are we? What the hell are humans? What are we? And I'm just going to leave that as an open-ended question. We're just a meat sack full of water, and we're walking around pooping and peeing, and we think we're pretty damn smart because we got cars and planes and shit. Is that it? What are we? What are you doing here? While you're here, what are you doing? And why are you doing it? Such meaning is usually perceived visually in the form of symbols, but may also be perceived as astonishing flashes of holistic intuition. I mean, like divine intervention, prayer. Things like that. Just one example. You got the other side too. I mean, just look outside on the streets in the main blue cities. Holistic intuition, or even in the form of scenarios involving both visual and oral perception. The mechanics by which the mind exercises the consciousness function will be addressed in more detail later in this paper. Frequency follow response. So now we're getting into things like 400 hertz in one ear and 404 hertz in the other ear, and the mind subtly picking up the difference. Let me show you. I think it was in 11 through 20. We're going to take our time with this document, folks. We're going to take our time. So it was down here that I saw while we were reviewing this earlier. Let's see if these links are still good. This was a very long time ago. Here they are. We have wave envelopes, superposition. Let's start at the top. Wave interference beats. And what I'm talking about here is two different frequencies that are very, very close that create a wave envelope. We can just say that this one is 4 hertz. You have two frequencies that are offset by 4 hertz, and you get an entirely new frequency. So you can play anything you want through headphones and offset it by some number of hertz, and you get this extra envelope of energy that comes out. And in this case, it's 500 in the left ear and 503 in the right ear. I forgot. Hold on a minute. You're all going to get to experience this with me together. So Let's share screen, share sound, and don't really hear much. Let's move it to 9. You hear that? We can go to 14. No, let's do 17. Why not? Now you're hearing that in both left and right at the same time. What I'm trying to illustrate for you is that it's possible to do this. You're hearing it. If you have left ear and right ear, I'll take that back. It's saying that it's playing it in two different, it's playing on a left channel and a right channel. So you can take their word for it on this website. Let's go back to, let's go to 1 hertz and see what it sounds like. Don't really hear much. It's 2. It's 3. Here's 5. Let's do 50. You hear difference in the left versus the right. I know this is getting annoying, so we'll stop here very shortly. This is the frequency follow response they're talking about. 10 hertz. So you can play with this website if you want. I'll show you another one here. What a wave envelope looks like. Because this is really what it's all about, right? Vibrations, whether they be transverse or longitudinal. And so what you see here, superposition of transverse waves. And the red wavelength is at 2.5 meters. It has an amplitude of 1 meter. Same thing with blue. They're just moving back and forth, right? They're moving in opposite directions. It's creating a standing wave. If you move them into the same direction, now you have where each one of them are very high, you get twice the amplitude. When each of them are in the low position, you get twice the amplitude going down. What happens if we change this? I changed it by 0.1 meter. And so now you have them slowly offsetting. You see the red and the blue are slowly getting further and further apart. And what you're getting is a different wave here at the bottom, the output wave. And then they'll come back together again. I will speed this up just a touch. So here is where they are roughly 1 meter apart from each other. And so you can see that they'll offset very quickly and they'll come back together. And here's where they cancel each other out. You get almost nothing. And they start to reinforce. And when they reinforce each other, you get that high amplitude again. And as they fall out of phase with each other again, you get down to basically nothing. So what we're talking about here is generating something that is equivalent to a frequency follow response. This can be done. If this was in the right ear, this is in the left ear, then you get this kind of a waveform passing through your brain. And if it's in the right hertz, then your brain picks up on it and it follows along. It's called the frequency follow response. So basic. And this is under Big Tech episode 18 in the archive notes. If you want to go there, showed you how. Big Tech show banner, PATRIOTSoapbox.com shows, Big Tech show banner. Go to the archives under Read, Watch, Think for Yourself. Go to episode 11 through 20. And this is under episode 18. There's a couple little things here that you can manipulate and mess around with. It's underneath and around brain stimulation, which we talked about once upon a time, many, many, many moons ago. Back to this document here. The frequency follow response. To achieve synchronization of brain hemispheres the Hemi-Sync technique takes advantage of a phenomenon known as the frequency follow response, which means that if a subject hears a sound produced at a frequency which emulates one of those associated with the operation of the human brain, right, the frequency of the human brain, the brain will try to mimic the same frequency pattern by adjusting its brainwave output. Therefore, if the subject is in a fully awake state but hears sound frequencies which approximates brainwave output at the theta level, the subject's brain will endeavor to alter its brainwave pattern from the normal beta to theta level. Since the theta level is associated with sleep, the subject concerned may progress from a fully awake to a sleep state, provided that he does not consciously resist. As the brain strives to entrain its wave frequency output with the one which the person hears. Since these brainwave frequencies are outside the spectrum of sounds, which can be heard in a pure form by the human ear, Hemi-Sync must produce them based on another phenomenon known as the brain's capacity for deducing, quote, beat, end quote, frequencies, beat frequencies. If the human brain is exposed to one frequency in the left ear, which is 10 hertz below another audible frequency played in the right ear, rather than hearing either of the two audible frequencies, the brain chooses to hear the difference between them, or the beat frequency, thus availing itself of the frequency follow response phenomenon. And using the technique of beat frequencies, the gateway system uses Hemi-Sync and other audio techniques employing the frequency follow response phenomenon to introduce a variety of frequencies which are played at a virtually subliminal, marginally audible level. The objective is to relax the left hemisphere of the brain, place the physical body in a virtual sleep state, and bring the left and right hemispheres into coherence under conditions designed to promote the production of even higher amplitude and frequency of brainwave output. Audible and perhaps subliminal suggestions by Bob Moreau accompany the various brainwave frequencies, which are sometimes rolled in together with other sounds, such as sea surf, to mask the sound frequencies when or where desirable. You mean you can overlay this stuff on an audio feed while you're sending me news, CNN? MSDNC? What about a movie? What about a movie? What about when a risque sex scene comes online, right? What happens then? What happens then? Well, at 2.4 hertz, if it'll load, depending on the frequencies chosen, we're looking at a patent, a method and apparatus for manipulating a nervous system, right? Depending on a frequency chosen, excitation of such resonances cause relaxation, sleepiness, sexual excitement, or the slowing of certain cortical processes, your brain. A weak electric field for causing the excitation is applied to the skin areas away from the head of the subject, such to avoid substantial polarization current densities in the brain. You don't want a tingling effect. There's an actual name for it. It's escaping me at the moment. By exploiting the resonance phenomenon, these physiological effects can be brought about by very weak electric fields produced by compact battery-operated devices. Now, what do you know of that's a compact battery-operated device that happens to maybe emit electric fields? Anybody? Sure isn't a pack of cigarettes, I'll tell you that. although it used to come in that form factor. They're a little bigger now. Very low currents are necessary. A fringe field of the doublet electrodes that form parallel plate condensers. Oh, you mean like capacitive sensors in a phone? Something like that? Yeah, something like that. We've gone over those. We'll go over them again. These are proximity sensors in your phone. Yes. They also sub as antennas for your phone for things like near-field communication and or scalable software-defined antennas for things like your Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, or cellular connection. And or drive things like a speaker or used as a microphone in something like a watch, because you have that nice, sleek, sexy form factor in a watch, right? So you want your antennas and you want everything in there to be multi-purpose, controlled by software in order to get something delicious, like a nice, sexy Hermes Apple Watch with a leather strap. God, I want one of those. I just want one of those. They're so beautiful. So beautiful. Let's get back to the brainwave entrainment with the frequency follow response. In this way, Gateway endeavors to provide the subject with the tools by which he may alter his consciousness based on his own volition over time through the repetitive use of tapes. It's just one example. Keep in mind, this was back in the early 80s. So as to access via intuitive means new categories of information not available to ordinary consciousness. In order to access new categories of information not available to ordinary consciousness. So let's talk about the role of resonance, since we just looked at sexual excitement at in that patent. It says at 2.4 hertz, and it says in the electromagnetic patents that those types of things can be overlaid on things like DVDs and VHS and over audio feeds and streams through broadcast television. It actually says that in the brainwave manipulation with electric fields from monitors patent from Mr. Luce, which is, you know, right here. It's not this one. It's in here somewhere. No, I can't believe I don't have it here. There it is. This one. You can look this up. It's a very common patent. It says here sexual excitement as well, depending upon the frequencies used. And we can say DVD. The implementations of the invention are adapted to the source of the video stream that drives the monitor, be it a computer program, a television broadcast, a videotape, or a digital video disc. So it could also be, you know, like a YouTube feed, satellite feed, something out of your set-top box. Just how much treason has really occurred in the last 20 years, folks? Just how much treason? How do you quantify crimes against humanity when you manipulate, potentially manipulate and disrupt a free, sovereign society in the affairs of self-governance? How do you put a punishment on something like that? I can think of one word. And it's 5 letters long. Right? Has an E and an A in the middle of it. Let's get back to the role of resonance. However, brain coherence through entrainment to beat frequencies introduced via stereo headphones is only part of the reason why the gateway system works. It is also designed to achieve the physical quietude characteristic of deep transcendental meditative states, which brings about a complete alteration of the fundamental resonance pattern associated with the sound frequencies produced by the human body. Whoa. So remember that thing with transcendental meditation where you're focusing on channeling energy up through your spinal cord, and through extended periods of meditation, your heartbeat changes and it creates standing waves and ventricles in your brain. And that then begins to start resonating and oscillating the rest of your brain. And it creates lucid states, excited states, pleasurable states, whatever it is. Transcendental meditation. So we've got this frequency follow response, binaural beats, brainwave entrainment, basic, and then they're trying to couple it with this idea of standing waves. So, yoga, Zen, or transcendental meditation, if practiced long enough, will produce a change in the sound frequency with which the human heart resonates throughout the entire body. According to Bentov, this change in resonance results from elimination of what the medical profession calls the bifurcation echo, so that the sound of the heartbeat can move synchronously up and down the circulatory system in harmonious resonance approximately 7 times a second. Bentov describes the role played by the bifurcation echo as follows. When the left ventricle of the heart ejects blood, the aorta, being elastic, balloons out just beyond the valve and causes a pressure pulse to travel down along the aorta. When the pressure pulse reaches the bifurcation in the lower abdomen, which is where the aorta forks into 2 and goes into the legs, part of the pressure pulse rebounds and starts traveling up the aorta. If in the meantime the heart ejects more blood, a new pressure pulse is traveling down. These 2 pressure points will eventually collide somewhere along the aorta and produce an interference pattern. So you've got pressure wave going down, it splits off before it goes into your legs. When it splits off, it creates a reflex, or what's the word I'm looking for? It's not really it's a reflection. That's a good way to say it. It creates a reflection. The pressure wave then bounces back towards the heart, right? In the meantime, the heart pumps. So you have a wave now, 2 waves traveling in different directions, and they're going to meet at some point. That's what they're talking about. This is happening in the aorta. The arteries, not the veins, the arteries in the body. But the blood is sent out from the heart. Arteries returns to the heart through the veins. By placing the body in a sleep-like trance, the gateway tapes achieve the same goal as meditation, in that it places the body in such a profoundly relaxed state that the bifurcation echo slowly fades away as the heart lessens the force and frequency with which it pushes blood into the aorta. The result is a regular, rhythmic sine wave pattern of sound, which echoes throughout the body and rises up into the head in a sustained resonance. So we're talking about your heart creating sustained, focused resonances up to, into your head, into your brain. Rhythmic sine waves of sound, pressure waves into your brain. The amplitude of this sine wave pattern, when measured with a sensitive seismograph type instrument, is about 3 times the average of the sound volume produced by the heart when it's operating normally. Interesting. Brain stimulation. Bentov's biomedical models show that this resonance is of considerable importance since it is directly transmitted to and impacts upon the brain. The resulting vibration is received and transmitted into the brain itself via the fluid-filled third and left ventricles located above the brainstem. An electromagnetic pulse is then generated, which stimulates the brain to raise the amplitude and frequency of brainwave output, just as Dr. Temlau observed in his research on the effects of the Hemi-Sync tapes. Also, the brain is contained in a tight membrane called the dura, which is in turn cushioned by a thin layer of fluid located between it and the skull. As the coherent resonance produced by the human heart in a state of profound relaxation reaches the fluid layer surrounding the brain, it sets up a rhythmic pattern in which the brain moves up and down approximately 0.005 to 0.010 millimeters in a continuous pattern. So your brain is literally being lifted up and let down, up and down, up and down. Just a little bit in a known repeated continuous pattern. The self-reinforcing character of resonant behavior accounts for the body's ability to sustain this movement despite the minimal level of energy involved. Think of that as you push somebody on a swing. You give them a little push and they move. You give them a little push again in the right sequence, in the right resonance, and pretty soon 10 little pushes and that person is moving on the swing. And you used very little energy. That's what they're getting at here. A minimal amount of energy is involved to get your brain to move 0.005 to 0.010 millimeters up and down or around in a continuous pattern with this fluid layer, right? In this way, the entire body, based on its own micromotion, functions as a tuned vibrational system which transfer energy in a range of between 6.8 and 7.5 hertz. What's the Schumann resonance again? What, just, they were talking up here a little earlier about 7 hertz, this rhythmic sine wave pattern. Talked about 7 hertz up in here somewhere, if I remember correctly. Anyway. Now we're down here, and this vibrational system, body's vibrational system, micromotion, transfers energy in the range between 6.8 and 7.5 hertz into the Earth's ionospheric cavity, which itself resonates at about 7 to 7.5 hertz. So now that we chop this statement up, let's read this again, right? The self-reinforcing character of resonant behavior accounts for the body's ability to sustain this movement of 0.005 to 0.010 millimeters, your brain moving up and down, right? Despite a minimal level of energy involved. So it continuously is doing this. In this way, the entire body, based on its own micromotion, functions as a tuned vibrational system which transfers energy in the range of between 6.8 and 7.5 hertz into the Earth's ionospheric cavity. We are transmitting energy out into the Earth's ionospheric cavity, every one of us. So this sort of explains loosely the measurements that you hear them talk about when, after 9/11, we measured the Earth and it was different. Or the Super Bowl. When people are watching halftime at the Super Bowl, we can measure that. Just think of the rituals that are done at things like the Super Bowl, knowing that there's this much focus and attention resonating. If they can get everybody watching to tune into a certain rhythmic frequency and then insert stimuli like dark magic or whatever the hell they do with their sex magic bullshit that's in every single one of these halftime shows nowadays. What is that doing? What is that? How does that relate to occultic practices? I'm just throwing that out there, considering what we're reading here, that we actually emit this resonant energy out into the ionosphere, every single one of us. That falls in line approximately with the Schumann resonance. So Bentoff states, this is occurring at a very long wavelength of about 40,000 kilometers, or just about the perimeter of the planet. Oh, that's nice to know. In other words, the signal from the movement of our bodies will travel around the world in about 1/7 of a second, 1/7 of a second through the electrostatic field in which we are embedded. Wow. The signal from the movement of our bodies, the energy that we emit from our bodies, will travel around the world in about 1/7 of a second through the electrostatic field in which we are embedded. Such a long wavelength knows no obstacles, and its strength does not attenuate much over large distances. Naturally, it will go through just about anything: metal, concrete, water, and the fields making up our bodies. It is the ideal medium for conveying a telepathic signal. So, I'm trying to get my mind wrapped around this at the same. This is kind of ridiculous. So this idea of feeling someone else's energy. Oh, when I get around that person, such good energy. Oh, he's so electrifying. Or, ooh, that person's an energy vampire. Right? That kind of stuff. That's not like complex, sophisticated measuring tools to be able to do things like read the Earth's general vibrational energy when people are all fawning over the frickin' Super Bowl, for example. That would be more like scientific measurements, not just the intuition or inclination that you have about a person when you meet them for the first time, or you are graced with their presence or cursed with their presence, dependent upon your point of view. Energy entrainment. We have about a half hour left. We're doing good. As the body is turned into a coherent oscillator, vibrating in harmony with the surrounding electrostatic medium, the specific exercises included in the gateway tapes enjoin the participant to build up the energy field surrounding his body, presumably by using energy from the Earth's field, which the body is now entraining because of its ability to resonate with it. This puts the body's energy field into homogeneity with its surrounding environment and promotes movement of the seat of consciousness into the surrounding environment, partly in response to the fact that the two electromagnetic medians are now a single energy continuum. Thus, the same process which moves the brain into focused coherence at steadily higher levels of frequency and amplitude so as to entrain analogous frequencies in the universe for data collection also promotes enhancement of bodily energy levels to a point adequate to permit the subject to experience an out-of-body movement when he is ready to do so. More will be said on this topic later. In addition, by resonating with the Earth's electromagnetic sphere, the human body creates a surprisingly powerful carrier wave to assist the mind in communication activity with other human minds similarly tuned. Whoa. Consciousness and energy. Before our explanation can proceed any further, it is essential to define the mechanism by which the human mind exercises the function known as consciousness, and to describe the way in which that consciousness operates to deduce meaning from the stimuli which it receives. To do this, we will first consider the fundamental character of the material world, in which we have our physical existence in order to accurately perceive the raw stuff with which our consciousness must work. The first point which needs to be made is that the two terms, matter and energy, tend to be misleading if taken to indicate two distinctly different states of existence in the physical world that we know. Indeed, if the term matter is taken to mean solid substances as opposed to energy, which is understood as to mean a force of some sort, then the use of the former is entirely misleading. Science now knows that both the electrons which spin in the energy field located around the nucleus of the atom and the nucleus itself are made up of nothing more than oscillating energy grids. Solid matter, in the strict construction of the term, simply does not exist. I'll say that again. Solid matter, in the strict construction of the term, simply does not exist. Rather, atomic structure is composed of oscillating energy grids surrounded by other oscillating energy grids which orbit at extraordinarily high speeds. Don't try to bend the spoon. That's impossible. Only try to realize the truth. There is no spoon. In his book, Stalking the Wild Pendulum, Ishtak Bentov gives the following figures. The energy grid, which composes the nucleus of the atom, vibrates at approximately 10 to the 22nd hertz, which means 10 followed by 22 zeros. That's the vibrational frequency, 10 followed by 22 zeros. At 70 degrees Fahrenheit, an atom oscillates at the rate of 10 to the 15 hertz, which is 10 with 15 zeros after it. An entire molecule composed of a number of atoms bound together in a single energy field vibrates in the range of 10 to the 9 hertz. A live human cell vibrates at approximately 10 to the 3rd hertz. 1 kilohertz, 1,000 hertz, or is that, no, that's 10 kilohertz, excuse me. 10,000 hertz. The point to be made is that the entire human being, brain, consciousness, and all, like the universe which surrounds him, is nothing more or less than an extraordinarily complex system of energy fields. I'll say that again. The point to be made is that the entire human being, brain, consciousness, and all, is, like the universe which surrounds him, nothing more or less than extraordinarily complex systems of energy fields. The so-called state of matter are actually variances in the state of energy, and human consciousness is a function of the interaction of energy in two opposite states, motion versus rest, in a manner described in the following paragraph. Now we get into holograms. You notice that all the little trendy technocrats want to talk about the world and the universe as a hologram? Well, this was written back in the 80s, folks. Energy creates, stores, and retrieves meaning in the universe by projecting or expanding at certain frequencies in a three-dimensional mode that creates a living pattern called a hologram. The concept of the hologram can be most easily understood by using an example cited by Bentov, in which he asks the reader to visualize a bowl full of water into which 3 pebbles are dropped. As the ripples created by the simultaneous entry of the 3 pebbles radiate outward towards the rim of the bowl, Bentov further asks the reader to visualize that the surface of the water is suddenly flash frozen so that the ripple pattern is preserved instantly. The ice is removed, leaving the 3 pebbles still laying at the bottom of the bowl. Then the ice is exposed to a powerful, coherent source of light, such as a laser. The result will be a 3-dimensional model or representation of the position of the 3 pebbles suspended in midair. Holograms are capable of encoding so much detail that, for example, it is possible to take a holographic projection of a glass of swamp water and view it under magnification to see small organisms not visible to the naked eye when the glass of water itself is examined. That's crazy. So they're saying that a hologram has so much detail, so much information stored in it, that if you were to take a hologram, or you were to project a hologram of a glass of swamp water and view it under magnification, you'd be able to see the small organisms not visible to the naked eye when the glass of water itself is examined. So it's that detailed. Just wait till we start looking at Mary Lou Jepsen and her company, Open Water, and her idea of creating hologram projections in your brain in order to create telepathic communication with something like a ski cap with cool little sensors on it that are made from the same components out of a cell phone. And if you don't believe me, I'm literally paraphrasing her own words. It's interferomic holography, using light and ultrasound to stimulate down to a voxel or subvoxels in your brain, and or to read down to a voxel or a subvoxel out of your brain to create things like synthetic telepathy that she's advocating for in order to get startup money for her company, Open Water. You can look this up. Open Water, Mary Lou Jepsen, former Google R&D for displays, former, I believe, Facebook R&D for displays in their Oculus program, and now has moved into her own endeavor. MIT grad, worked in China or in Asia for 8 years approximately. We will watch a few of her videos at some point to really drive this point home about infrared light and ultrasound, but I'm digressing. We're talking about holography and the amount of information that can be stored in it or potentially transmitted. Depends on how you want to look at that. Mary Lou Jepsen, Open Water. Look it up. The whole concept of holography, despite its scientific implications, has only been known to the physicists since the underlying mathematical principles were worked out by Denis Gabor in 1947. He later won a Nobel Prize for his work. Laboratory demonstration of Gabor's work only occurred years later following the invention of the laser. As biologist Lyall Watson explains, the purest kind of light available to us is that produced by a laser, which sends out a beam in which all the waves are of one frequency, like those made by an ideal pebble in a perfect pond. When two laser beams touch, they produce an interference pattern of light and dark ripples that can be recorded on a photographic plate. And if one of the beams, instead of coming directly from the laser, is reflected first off an object, such as a human face, the resulting pattern will be very complex indeed. But it can still be recorded. The record will be a hologram of the face. Does anybody want to log into their phone using the 30,000 points of light? Should we show that? Is that appropriate right now? You know, considering that we're talking about light and lasers and it bouncing off the face and then being able to do things like create a hologram. You know, just saying. I think it's in history. I watched it recently. Yes, it's right here. $30,000 dots on your face. It projects out all around you. These are independently addressable lasers that come out of an iPhone. The iPhone 10, that's the old model, has a new way to unlock your phone. Just look. It's called Face ID. And you see those lights up there flashing, huh? Recognizes your face and it unlocks. Those lights flashing are those lasers that are interacting with each other, creating different wavelengths of light. Infrared camera reads the dot pattern, captures an infrared image, and sends the data to a secure enclave in the A11 bionic chip. That's an artificially intelligent chip, narrow band, narrow artificial intelligence, using approximately 7 nanometer long transistors. They're down to 5 nanometer transistors at this point, and that's as small as they can go. They have to start using biology if they want to get any smaller. But as it relates to synthetic, silicon or otherwise, transistors used in chips for phones, 5 nanometers is the physical limit at this point. A flood illuminator, it emits a giant amount of infrared light, just a general floodlight. Then you have more than 30,000 invisible dots. They're projected onto your face to build a unique facial map. Oh, you mean like a hologram? Because they're lasers that are then received by a camera or a photo plate when we, because we're, photo plate, right? 2 laser beams touch, they produce an interference pattern of light, dark ripples, so you can see the red while your face is logging in, right? Can be recorded on a photographic plate or through an infrared photoreceptor, a photodiode, or a camera. And if it's bounced off the human face, the resulting patterns will be very complex indeed, but it can still be recorded. The record will be a hologram of the face. So we will continue on. The part encodes the whole. Of further importance is the fact that even if we dropped our frozen hologram of the ripple pattern on the floor, keep in mind three pebbles in a bowl, and as those waves ripple across, the bowl instantly freezes. You take that bowl out, you take the frozen piece out, you shine laser through it, and you get a recreation of those 3 pebbles because of the ripples. That's the experiment they're talking about in this document, right? Listen to this. Of further importance is the fact that even if we dropped our frozen hologram, the ripples on top from the 3 pebbles, if we drop that frozen water that has the hologram of the ripple pattern on the floor and it broke into a number of pieces, each individual piece would recreate the entire holographic image all by itself. Say what? Does that compute? Does that click, man? Does that click at all? So you got this bowl of frozen water. It's got ripples on the top of it. You can shine light through it, and you can image the 3 pebbles that made the ripples that instantly froze on this bowl of water. You take the ice out, the frozen water out. You drop it on the floor. You pick up one piece, and you can get the entire image, the entire holographic image out of that one piece. That's what they're saying here. The smaller the piece, the fuzzier and more distorted would be the resulting holographic projection. But the fact remains that the whole projection would nonetheless be made. The key to creating any hologram is that energy and motion must interact with energy in a state of rest. In the foregoing example, the pebbles represent energy and motion, while the water, before its agitation by the pebbles being dropped into it, represent energy at a state of rest. To activate or, in effect, to perceive the meaning of a holograph, energy, in this case, coherent light source such as a laser beam, must be passed through the interference patterns generated by the interaction between the moving energy and the energy at rest. So to activate or to perceive, to be able to see the holograph, a laser, in this case, right, energy, in this case we're talking about a laser, has to shine through the interference patterns that were made from the object in motion interacting with the object at rest. And in this example, it is the pebbles being dropped into a still bowl of water that create wave interference. This idea of objects or energy in motion coming into contact with object or energy at rest, creating a pattern that you can then shine light through or shine an energy source through and be able to read what's going on. Now, extrapolate this out to signals intelligence. We have a simple example of a bowl with water in it, rocks being dropped into it, having the thing frozen so that you can look at it in a still framed environment. And you get holography, you get a hologram, right? What can signals intelligence do when you're talking about throwing around electromagnetic energy as one type of signals intelligence? As a known source of energy that's measurable, quantifiable, and a constant because you can control it very precisely. To interact with anything else and have systems that are able to compensate for movement, motion, or a lack thereof to clean up the signal. And then to potentially have additional energy sources, also signals intelligence, potentially also electromagnetic, microwave, millimeter wave, radio wave, light, sound, doesn't really matter. As a secondary, tertiary, or quaternary field, energy field, to create the ability to generate a hologram of the environment, up to and including extracting things like speech out of thin air, just like that. So, if that was too much, stay tuned, because we're going to go there, piece by piece by piece by piece. We've already gone there at a very high level over the last almost a year at this point. We are on episode 87. But we're going to go through it again and polish it and go through it again and polish it some more, and we'll just keep going. But if this hologram exists, if this quote unquote from the technocrat field, right? Those people in that field think that we live in a simulation, a hologram. And this idea of everything being energy, and it's energy surrounding energy in just complex forms that create it and make up solid matter. To dissect that and segment that, itemize, quantify, and define that, categorize that, and understand it at that level, at the quantum mechanical level, if you will. Is it so far-fetched to think that humans would want to be able to measure and understand that down to as infinitesimally small of a space as possible? I'll give you an example. This is a scalar field. In mathematics and physics, a scalar field associates a scalar value to every point in space, possibly physical space. The scalar may either be dimensionless mathematical number or a physical quantity. In a physical context, scalar fields are required to be independent of the choice of reference frame, meaning that any two observers using the same units will agree on the value of the scalar field at the same absolute point in space or space-time, regardless of their respective points of origin. Common unified map of time and space. Or if there is no time and space, a common uniform map in dimensionless space. In dimensional analysis, a dimensionless quantity is the quantity to which no physical dimension is assigned. Oh, I mean like not the third dimension. Okay. Also known as a bare, pure, or scalar quantity, or a quantity of dimension 1, with a corresponding unit of measurement in the SI of the unit 1. Scalar fields. And we can generate scalar energy like no problem. That's just two electromagnetic waves that are 180 degrees out of phase that create a scalar wave. And if you emit that over the entire Earth, then you can generate things like a scalar map of the Earth. And if you understand things down at the quantum mechanical level, well, hell, then you can probably start measuring the various dimensions that are around the Earth or that the Earth is within. And then create stable interacting fields whereby dimensions then become blurred. Perhaps you can jump in and out of them. Your consciousness, I mean, because we are reading about this idea of tuning into the Earth's resonance and taking your consciousness out of body into the ether and to extract additional information out of the cosmic energy field. That, you know, just kind of going there. So I'll give you another example. That's a scalar field. You can look that up. Won't blow your mind. Evanescent field. This is the other one that really kind of took me back. This idea of an evanescent field. In electromagnetics, an evanescent field or evanescent wave is an oscillating electric and or magnetic field that does not propagate as an electromagnetic wave, but whose energy is spatially concentrated in the vicinity of the source, oscillating charges and currents. Even when there is propagating electromagnetic wave produced, for example, by an antenna, one can still identify as an evanescent field the component of the electric or magnetic field that cannot be attributed to the propagating wave observed at a distance of many wavelengths. A hallmark of an evanescent field is that there is no net energy flow in that region. Since the net flow of electromagnetic energy is given by the average pointing vector, this means that the pointing vector in these regions averaged over a complete oscillation cycle is 0. And what's interesting about these things is that you have things like evanescent wave coupling used in photonic and nanophotonic devices as waveguide sensors. Evanescent wave coupling is used to excite, for example, dielectric microsphere resonators. Well, we got a lot of dielectric things in us. We're dielectric, by the way. Humans, naturally, are dielectric. Your organs, your blood, your tissue, your bones, all those things are dielectric. They have different dielectric properties. And if you don't believe me, I'll show you. Dielectric. I hacked that up. Let's see. Body tissue dielectric parameters. So let's just pick 1900 megahertz because 1.9 gigahertz is a common cell phone transmission frequency, and we get things like this. The following tissue dielectric parameters are computed according to the Four-Cole model described in the compilation of the dielectric properties of body tissues at radio frequency and microwave frequencies. Tissues: bladder, blood, bone, cancellous, bone, cortical, bone marrow, infiltrated, bone marrow, non-infiltrated, breast fat, cartilage, cerebellum, cerebral spinal fluid, colon, your large intestine, cornea, the dura, we talked about that today, that's the lining around the brain, eye tissue, fat, fat mean, gallbladder, gallbladder bile, gray matter, heart, kidney, lens cortex, lens nucleus, liver, lung, inflated or deflated, muscle, parallel fiber, muscle, transverse fiber, up and down, left and right, right, parallel, transverse, nerve, spinal cord, ovary, skin versus wet or dry, small intestine, spleen, stomach, the esophageal, sounds like a song, tendon, the testes, prostate, thyroid, thalamus, tongue, trachea, the uterus, vitreous humor, white matter, also the brain. And down here, they specifically average out the brain, the skull, and muscle for permittivity, conductivity, and density. And these are common mathematical conversions for computing the dielectric permittivity, the dielectric properties of tissue when phased with 1.9 gigahertz or 1900 megahertz energy. So all that said, huge digression. This idea that human, has created technology to be able to generate holographic images with such detail that they can potentially image down to the virus or the bacteria level. And in the example they gave in this document, it was swamp water. But considering we're 70% water and a lot of the sensory functions can just pass right through us, what are the odds that they can measure the bacteria and viruses in you at this point? Just saying. Hashtag 5G. Welcome to the new world. And I'll stop. We will start on section 13 next time.